This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1505, Spotlight on Dr. Doom.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo. And I'm Chris Eberly.
A little bit more. And welcome to the show. I almost laughed again. Oh, boy. Fun, and frolic.
That's the name of the game. Fun, frolic, and doom.
Doom. I wanted to...
And fellowship, gentlemen.
If I could have swung it, I wanted to find Bender's Doom from Futurama. Oh, well. This episode of Comic Geek Speak is brought to you by the fine folks at superherostuff.com, where you go to for all of your...
Superhero stuff!
Boy, that was really good. For this, the dose of you.
It's so much easier to do that when you're actually in the studio. Don't leave me hanging.
Go to superherostuff.com for all your geekery needs. Shirts, t-shirts, hats, hoodies, kids' backpacks, lunch bags, pins, buttons, wallets. A whole plethora of geek goodness right on their front page. One of their daily deals. And they have deals and coupons all the time. Sign up for their emails. They have coupons that come through there. This year seems to be their 15th anniversary. Right now there's a 15% off site-wide. Use code Timeline15. So check that out before you order stuff. Like I said, they're changing their specials and coupons all the time. There's a Fantastic Four special shop, and in it, appropriately enough, is a Doom zipper hoodie sweatshirt that when you zip it all the way up, makes the hood with the Doom mask on it. It's fantastical, no pun intended. Wow. Well, sort of intended.
Thank you for mentioning that, Shane.
It's pretty sweet.
So appropriate.
So definitely go there for any geek in your life for presents. Oh my God, they have Wolverine socks, Batman belt, caped boxer brief. Boy, do they look like something. Wow. Batman socks, women t-shirts and swimsuits and all kinds of skirts, jackets. Oh, wow. Deadpool jacket. A varsity type looking one. There's a Deadpool mug. They must have gotten a whole bunch of new Deadpool stuff in here. Here's a periodic table that is Batman. Batman.
Right.
Which is quite cute.
It's like the symbol for sodium several times over again, directly from the periodic table.
It's fantastic.
And then at the end of the row, it's a yellow square with a Batman symbol in it.
Awesome. So go to superherostuff.com for all of your
superhero stuff.
Excellent.
And if you've never done so before, you get a free magnet with your first purchase. Ooh. Special promotion. Does that say 15th anniversary sale?
15th anniversary
They've been around
sale.
that long?
1999.
Congratulations. I didn't realize they were around that long.
Yeah,
Holy
that's
mackerel.
awesome.
They're as old as Wild Pig. I'm honored.
It's good company to be in.
We started our insane journeys at the same time.
Endeavors.
Indeed. We should point out that my devilish younger son, Junbei, is in the studio and has been texting Shane and causing all kinds of mischief.
I hear buzzing. I'm like, man,
just
talked to Carly.
June, do you want to say hello on the mic? No, he won't. All right.
No, he won't? All right. Are you sure? Come over here and quick say hi. That one's not turned up. What number is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead, try that.
Hello.
There you go.
There's my boy.
All righty. So, Professor.
Gentlemen, it's been too long since we've done a spotlight.
It has been a while.
And because last time we did, I actually want to make a note about our last one, Fantastic Four in the Bronze Age murder. Coincidentally, right after we did that, which I believe we did that in June, I think? So
sure.
A couple months ago.
I can't even remember how long ago it's been.
Back Issue released a whole tribute to Fantastic Four in the Bronze Age. So if you really enjoyed what we were talking about in that episode, for an even more comprehensive and detailed perspective, I forgot the issue number. It's the
I'll see if I can look it up.
Maybe the last issue that came out, or maybe 2 back. It's outstanding because it's back issue. There's always a great magazine. They even have a blurb on the Fantastic Four radio show we were wondering about. They interviewed the guy who produced it. It's a fantastic article. They talk about the Thing, Do Your Thing Ring cartoon show. Murd, by the way, I've watched the Spider-Woman cartoons. I haven't watched the Thing one yet, though, that you lent me. So
saving the worst for last.
Indeed, but that magazine is a wonderful revisiting the entire Bronze Age era of the Fantastic Four. So
could it have been issue 74?
What's on the cover?
It looks like Doom over top of Mr. Fantastic as Thing and Human Torch are coming at him.
Most likely, yes.
Came out in August of 2014.
That's definitely it. Yep. So excellent. Now, having said that, I was really looking forward to getting back in the studio to do another spotlight. Of course, all the vicissitudes of family schedule can sometimes make that difficult, but we're here.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And you more than anyone, my friend.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
And I'm in both in awe and perhaps feeling pity for the schedule that you're enduring. But I've been talking about this for quite some time, that I've wanted to do sort of a FF, let's call it, I don't know, subsidiary spotlight or,
appendix spotlight?
Well done. On my favorite supervillain and the arch nemesis of the Fantastic Four, and some would argue the supervillain of the Marvel Universe, Dr. Doom. So today we're going to wax rhapsodic about Doom, the history of the character, our take on the character, of course, key elements of the Doom persona and how they play out in the Marvel Universe. Now, we're not going to do a thorough checklist on Doom, only because apparently there's over 700 appearances of Dr. Doom in the Marvel Universe. Ladies and gentlemen, I love doing spotlights, but I got 2 jobs, I got a family. I just couldn't find the time to chronicle 700 different appearances of Dr. Doom.
We'd be here for 24
yes,
hours.
But we have prepared sort of a primer. Is it primer or primer, Murd?
I always say primer.
I believe it is primer.
Okay, thank you.
Primer is like a kind of paint.
Right, thank you. So we prepared a primer, or like a recommended reading list of what we consider to be some of the most important and also some of the best Doctor Doom appearances in the Marvel Universe. And we have to remember that Doom is such a villain of this monumental significance that even though he's always associated with the Fantastic Four as their arch nemesis, he's basically appeared in every other Marvel title. I mean, he's appeared in Dazzler, okay? He's appeared in giant-sized Master of Kung Fu. Doom has been everywhere. I've always joked that every hero kind of gets the rite of passage when Doctor Doom appears in their comic. I think the first time he appeared in Amazing Spider-Man, I think it was issue 5, maybe 6
it
or
is
7.
Definitely 5. It's
Thank
right
you,
here
sir.
in my notes.
Thank you very much, Murd. So Doom is everywhere, and there's a reason for that. And we're going to talk about why we think Doom is so important and why he's had such staying power. And also, he's a character who's really gone through quite a metamorphosis over the years. When we did our FF and the Silver Age Spotlight, and I remember Jamie D was talking about how Doom's first appearance is kind of wahaha goofy in some ways, and I would concur with that. But boy, what a trajectory they take that character on through the decades. And we've kind of broken down our primer a little bit roughly by decades of just sort of key Doom appearances that we think are really worth seeking out. And all the stuff we're going to talk about, most of it's in trade, or you can find it in some kind of reprint edition, whether it's Marvel Masterwork or specialized trade. So I've been looking forward to this episode for months, and I've been working on it the past few weeks, and I'm very excited to discuss it. Before we get into our traditional initial impressions, I just wanted to point out one of the reasons I wanted to run with this is that I've always felt that Doom for me has a very special place in not just in the Marvel Universe, but in just comic book villainy in general. And I think that one of the reasons why he's so used, someone might say overused at times, but so heavily used in so many different titles and events throughout the years, is he just there's sort of a combination of this character, the genius, the weaponry, the fact that he's a sorcerer, the fact that he's a monarch of his own country, his phenomenal look, the appearance of Doom, especially when the right artist get their hands on him, he's terrifying. Some have argued that Doom was the inspiration for Darth Vader. I don't know if I'm not in George Lucas's head. I don't know if that's true, but
I could see that.
It
if
wouldn't
that was
surprise me to some degree.
Yeah.
And Doom is also a very tormented character. And as we go through his history and his origin was fleshed out first by Lee and Kirby and then masterfully later on, especially by Roger Stern in the Triumphant Torment Doctor Strange graphic novel, which is a classic, and then from perhaps my favorite Doom story, Books of Doom by Ed Brubaker, which I'll talk about at great length later on. Doom is not the carbon copy, tie the girl to the train tracks, troll your mustache type villain. There's a lot going on with this character. And for me, I'm just speaking for myself, he is the supervillain in the Marvel Universe. And I note that, Doom is not the most powerful villain. Murray, I think you'd agree that Thanos is a far more powerful entity, right, than Dr. Doom.
In terms of just raw energy manipulation,
cosmic power,
raw brawn, mightamane. Yes, absolutely. But
there's definitely characters that are more powerful. Thanos is a great example. Than Dr. Doom, but Dr. Doom just has something. A lot of the characters, as I mentioned earlier, that just, for me, just kind of set him apart. And I'm just really looking forward to discussing that. Now, but before we go further, let's just hear our initial impressions. Shane, what are your take on, as just as a longtime comic reader, your take on Dr. Doom?
Doom is one of my favorite villains in the Marvel Universe. Not only is he, the leader of a nation, he is, I would say, the archenemy of the Fantastic Four.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
He's also helped them on occasion, even the Marvel
for his
Universe,
own interest, yes.
Which is interesting.
More than once, yep.
So at times he's very ambiguous, but he always has his own underlying interests at heart. I like the Doombot angle. I think my first encounter...
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
My first encounter with Doom, mine was probably, if I'm not mistaken, the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends opening. Didn't it have Doom in the opening credits?
I don't remember. I had that on a bootleg, but I haven't watched it in a while.
As they go through the whole opening credits,
Certainly
just at some point there's. I just remember a cartoon with Doom, and he's just standing here in like a pose of power.
You said Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends?
Yeah.
Yes, that rings a bell with me too, Shane.
I think that's the first time I ever saw Doom, back when I was a kid. And just an interesting designed character. Just love what he's brought to the Marvel Universe as a big baddie.
All right.
I have not read a whole lot of Doom-centric stories.
Yeah.
Most of what I've read is a little bit in later FF stuff.
We'll get into that, though. Absolutely.
But it's cool.
Brother?
Well, I think the first exposure I had to Dr. Doom as a character was actually as an action figure, probably from the Secret Wars
yes.
series. Yes, I did have a few of those, Dr. Doom and Dr. Octopus among them. But as to Dr. Doom as a character, I absolutely agree that he is a fantastic visual, very imposing, sort of a blend of the medieval and the modern.
Yes.
Merging the menace of both periods, and it's representative of his capabilities, too. He's such a resourceful foe. As you've already said, Chris, he understands sorcery as well as science, and wields them both with equal adeptness. But what really defines Doom as a villain for me, it's not the armor or the powers or the mastery of science, but it's just the sheer monumental ego that he represents.
Yes.
That is Doom's greatest superpower, as far as I'm concerned, is absolute certainty that the unflappable faith in his own abilities and in the superiority of same to those of everyone else on the planet, with the possible nagging exception of Reed Richards. It's just that little grain of sand that gets caught between his in that oyster shell of his armor and just irritates him, and it causes him to cough up pearls of brilliance constantly as he comes up with plan after plan, invention after invention, and just this rivalry with Richards is so often at the back of his mind, and yet how he just allows that to drive him on. But there's more to him than that, of course. He's such a complex figure.
Yes,
he's driven by the Richards rivalry, his desire to see his vanity, the perceived damage done to his visage, which is really his own fault. I think we can all agree.
Yes.
His mother, his obsession with his sainted gypsy sorcerer mother, who languishes in hell, and whom he has tried time and again. It's this dimension of nobility to his character, that he's always, in addition to trying to take over the world, he's trying to rescue his mother's soul from torment. And it's just his powerful, indomitable will. it's even though he doesn't have any actual superhuman powers, when you have that much built-in drive, I mean, how much superhuman ability do you really need? He's a little something in common with Batman there, I suppose, because Batman has
interesting, Murd. I never thought of that.
An ability in common there, you might say, the drive and the willpower. And the fact that he becomes the sovereign of his own country, and the fact that he at times seems to genuinely care for its citizenry is another wrinkle to his character. But at the end of the day, it's just that sheer quivering megalomaniacal ego that just drives him to succeed the way that he does. He just so clearly views himself the superior of any and every being he comes across, even those that are literally gods. And he just sees himself as the equal of any of them. And there was another point I wanted to make in here somewhere, but I seem to have lost my way back to it.
I have no doubt you'll find your way back to it, my friend.
Anyway, yes, it's just... It's almost kind of inspiring, the way he's able to... just thinks quite that highly of himself, and the fact that he's able to bear that ego of his out in certainly not every case, but in as many cases as he does, to succeed as often as he does, and I'm also just his habit of referring to himself constantly in the third person endears him to me still further. I mean, not only does he have this huge ego, he takes himself exceedingly seriously, and the fact that he has the abilities, the resourcefulness to get away with it, to think of himself as so far removed from all the other super beings on this planet full of marvels, and to be able to stand among them and earn his place, through committing atrocities for the most part.
Indeed,
it's still they're remarkable atrocities.
Now, a question.
Please.
Do his subjects like him?
That has been the general consensus, because I reread a lot of classic Doom stories in preparation for this. Because I own and trade a lot of Doom's key appearances. His subjects, my impression is that they love him because he brings stability, security, and prosperity to their small Balkan nation, which was, before he took control, was like a backwater in the Marvel universe. Essentially a third world nation in Europe. But you also get the sense that they also recognize that if they don't obey him, there will be dire consequences. So you get the impression that Doom loves his people, but that love is also centered in the fact that he expects absolute unconditional obedience from them at all times.
So the love itself is quite conditional.
And there's to be absolutely no questioning his agenda, his rule, nothing. So he'll often talk about see how my subjects love me. And I remember there's one Byrne issue where Johnny Storm's thinking, wow, it looks like, they actually do really love him. And he often boasts about how much he cares for his people and how much he's done for them. And so forth. So
he is subject to mood swings on occasion, though, when he's suffered some reversal, and he tends to take it out occasionally on the people.
Oh, but Doom has committed numerous atrocities against his own people. There's no question about that. One of the things we have to remember as we get into, before I get to my own initial impressions, is that Doom is a stone-cold, ruthless killer. And different creators have kind of touched upon that in different ways. When we get to the FF story Unthinkable from the 2000s, probably the most terrifying rendition of Dr. Doom ever done, where he does some truly awful things in his, as Murd pointed out, his egotistical quest to show that he's superior to Richards. And again, it's just part of his complexity. I mean, for me, my early memories of Doom are kind of all over the place, because even in the 70s and early 80s when I was growing up, Doom was everywhere, not just in Fantastic Four, but he would appear in all kinds of Marvel multimedia and toys and in books, shirts, so forth and so on. I knew who Dr. Doom was. Even before I read a lot of stories with Doom, I knew who he was, and I was mesmerized by his look. I loved the armor. There was something so frightening but also majestic about his appearance. And when the artists draw Doom, the way he poses and stands, you can't deny that there's a majesty to the character and something awe-inspiring about him. At the same time, he's frightening. I mean, he's a man who's encased himself in armor virtually at all times, I guess except when he goes to bed. But he's rarely seen in comics without. There's some occasions, but rarely seen without his armor or some version or part of his armor. I mean, there's one story where he's taking breakfast on the balcony in his palace, and he's in a majestic bathrobe, but he has his faceplate on, so he's eating breakfast. But I was always just mesmerized by the look of Doom and that sort of sinister grandeur. Then as I started to read the stories, Bring on the Bad Guys was my first exposure probably to Dr. Doom in comics, which of course features two of the most important Dr. Doom stories, Issue 5, his first appearance, and the all-important FF Annual 2, where Lee and Kirby really start to explore, and it's still really the foundation of everything, the origin of Dr. Doom, what drives him in his various quests. So, and as I got older and I read more and more of Doom's appearances, because there are over 700 of them in the Marvel Universe, I was just so taken by everything Murd said. I echo. I mean, the staggering ego and the lengths he'll go to prove that that his ego and his confidence in himself is justified, and often the horrible, unspeakable things he'll do to further justify that he is Doom, and Doom is all, and Doom again. There's the third person, right? Doom is just and Doom is right, and it's he's in the right hands, and a lot of great creators have worked on the Doctor Doom character because he's been around since virtually the beginning of the Marvel Age. There's no more compelling stories about a villain than some of the best Doctor Doom stories, and there's a real tragedy to the character that we're going to explore here. He's not, as you mentioned, he's not a black and white. He's not a black and white character. All right, there's a lot going on with Doom. So those are my initial impressions of that character. Any other comments before we kind of plunge in here to the various aspects of the spotlight?
You mentioned that a lot of really great creators have worked on Dr. Doom over the years.
Indeed.
We can also say that some not-so-great creators have worked on the character. But most of the time, their work just gets written off as having been a Doombot instead of been...
It's funny you mention that, Murd, because the Doom has appeared so many times in Netherlands, not every story is going to be wonderful. And the thing about the Doombots that I just find, it's a convenient plot device, because when you're reading Dr. Doom appearances, you're never really actually sure, is this actually Dr. Doom, or is it one of his Doombots? And many times, it's a Doombot. A lot of times, they'll retcon saying, oh, that was a Doombot.
Exactly what I'm saying.
It's a very convenient plot device.
It shows you how high an opinion that the creators who work on Doom have for the character, but they actually go out of their way to negate the work of other creators who are not true to what these creators think is the truest vision of Doom.
Let me start with, I have a quote from Stan Lee. It's actually from Bring on the Bad Guys. He writes, he's talking about Doom's origin. I'm especially fond of this particular origin story because it serves as a perfect example of the way I prefer to see a villain portrayed. Menacing, yes. Evil, perhaps. And yet, far too complex to be neatly labeled as a typical bad guy. I think of him instead as a man with his own drives, his own needs, his own pains and frustrations. A man to be feared, to be shunned, but also to be studied and perhaps even pitied. And I like that quote quite a bit because I think it really captures the complexity of the Doom character. And then this is Kirby's, because remember, like, again, with any Marvel creation of the Silver Age, it's a co-creation. Lee and Kirby, there's always the ongoing debate we've talked about many times about who created what and who has more stake in a certain character in terms of the creation. So it's always hard to say. But we'll just stick with the fact that, again, Doom is very much a co-creation. Of course, we could assume, of course, the visual is totally Kirby. I would certainly imagine. But we can't also undersell, Lee's contributions in terms of dialogue and characterization. Kirby said this in 1976. Dr. Doom is a paranoid. He thinks he's ugly and he wants the whole world to be like him. Paranoids are insane people who never get their way. And then he had another quote about Doom in 1987. Dr. Doom was the classic conception of death. It was the reason for the armor and the hood. Death is connected with armor and human-like steel. Death is something without mercy, and human flesh contains that element of mercy, which I think is a very interesting observation on the significance of Doom's armor. And we're going to talk about why Doom wears the armor, what the armor actually represents, because there's a story to that too. Now, Murd mentioned before Doom's deformity, which of course is one of the fundamental reasons he wears the mask. And it's interesting because Lee and Kirby apparently, based on interviews and quotes, have different perspectives on the degree of Doom's deformity. The story that most people are familiar with is that in Fantastic Four Annual 2, they explore that when Doom went to college in the fictional State University with Reed Richards, he was obsessed, as Murd mentioned, with trying to contact his mother, whose soul was being tormented in the netherworld. They retconned that it was Mephisto who had control of his mother's soul. And he developed some kind of device that would open a gateway to the netherworld. And, of course, it's the famous moment where Reed Richards on a lazy afternoon comes into Doom's dormitory and goes, hey, these calculations are off. And Doom says, how dare you, get out of here, et cetera, and so forth, in his pontificating style. And he turns on the portal, and it blows up in his face, literally, and Doom is disfigured and expelled from school and so forth. Now, Kirby insists that when that happened, Doom only had a very small scar on his face, but his ego was so monumental that scar alone, he couldn't take it, and he had to conceal his face because of that simple scar. Whereas Lee said, no, his face was ravaged by that explosion, and because, again, of his just superhuman vanity, he had to conceal it. He couldn't bear the thought of it. The other interesting aspect of that, if you read the FF Annual 2, Doom travels to Tibet because he hears stories of this ancient order of mystic monks who can further school him in science, super science, and sorcery. And they become his disciples because, of course, he is Doom and eventually takes charge of them. And they're helping him forge his armor, and they prepared the mask. They say, Master, wait, it hasn't cooled. He says, bah, pain is for lesser men. And he dons the mask while it's still white hot, and that probably further disfigured his face, essentially,
Sure.
based on whether you go with the Kirby tradition of his one scar or the lead that was already disfigured. But there's no denying now that Doom's face is hideously disfigured. Murd, you want to say something? I'm sorry.
I'm just pondering the classic sort of theatrical irony of that. Like, character's tragic flaw is, almost completely self-inflicted.
Exactly. And, of course, if you see renderings of Doom before that, he was a very handsome man. And, the vanity and the ego. And, of course, the key element here is it wasn't his fault. It was Richards. Richards was the one who was meddling with his experimentation. And it was Richards who caused the explosion. And it was Richards who, therefore, was the catalyst for Doom's facial disfigurement. Interestingly enough, I've forgotten this. And I miss Jamie every day, but I miss him really right now because I'm going to mention Age of Ultron. And I would love to have heard him rip it apart when I did that. But apparently they revealed at Age of Ultron that Ben Grimm admitted that he had gone into Doom's dormitory and apparently futzed with the Machine because he, out of his spitefulness and his dislike of the Doom character. Because Doom was in college with them, and he was resentful towards Richard. He thought Ben Grimm was like an oaf essentially.
Yeah.
And apparently, Age of Ultron, Grimm basically admitted he said, "I created Dr. Doom," basically. But I didn't care much for Age of Ultron, but I forgot about that.
I missed that. Yeah.
That admission. Apparently, does that ring a bell with you, Murd? Or
I don't. Did that happen in the main miniseries?
I'm not sure. I was reading notes online. So maybe someone can correct me on the forums if I have that wrong. But as far as I remember, I read it in a couple of different places that came out in that story. So that's if you talk about retconning, if that's true, that's a classic example of that.
Huge. But
regardless, at the core of that origin is the ego, the vanity, and everything is Richard's fault because Richards is inferior to Doom, and therefore, this is me speaking as Doom in the third person, basically, and therefore there's no possible way that Doom could have had the calculations wrong. And therefore, it had to be Richard's fault. Now, let's start a little bit just talking about Doom's origin. There's two key places to go here for the origin. It all starts in FF Annual 2, 1964. That's by Lee Kirby and the inker Chick Stone. And the follow-up to that, or sort of the elaboration and sort of updating, but not the disrespecting of that origin, is the Books of Doom miniseries from 2006 by Ed Brubaker. That alone sells it. I think it's Pablo Raimondi and the inker Mark Farmer. If you're a Dr. Doom fan, or if you're just interested in learning about Dr. Doom, these are the two stories you have to read immediately. Because FF Annual 2, I think, is one of the best Lee Kirby origin stories. It's really well done, and there's some real sophistication in the narrative. And Books of Doom, and I love when a writer does this well, takes the origin story, doesn't chuck any of it, he just elaborates on it, kind of updates it. And if you have not read Books of Doom, it's yet another example of why Ed Brubaker is one of the best writers working in comics today. I just reread it last week. It's riveting. It's so well done. We'll talk about that more shortly. But just to touch upon some of the key elements. Remember, Dr. Doom was born a member of the Roma. He was a gypsy. And in the small, Marvel Universe Balkan nation of Latvaria. Lee was always apparently very proud of his creation, the name Latvaria. And Latvaria on the Marvel map is located between Hungary, Serbia, and Romania. And it's also bordered by Silver Sable's nation of Simcaria. Mm-hmm. Is it Simcaria? Is that pronounced correctly?
As far as anyone knows.
And, so Latvaria is in the Balkans, in southeastern Europe. And traditionally that's an area where you have a lot of gypsy tribes who travel around in Romania, for example. And it's established that Latvaria is a poor nation, a small nation ruled by a petty monarchy, essentially. And the gypsies who would set up camp in Latvaria were persecuted by its military, which was controlled by someone known as often just called the Baron. Basically, it's later established there was an actual king, but and Victor von Doom, Dr. Doom's actual name. His father was Werner von Doom, who they established as like if not a medically trained doctor, then a gifted healer, let's say.
Worked with herbs.
Yeah, more a man, let's say, of not of magic, but more of the medical arts and science. And then, of course, his mother, Cynthia, was a sorceress. And so right away they set up that Doom comes from both places, from science, represented by his father's healing arts, and the mysticism of his mother. And it's revealed kind of in pieces, then Brubaker really goes into it in Books of Doom, that when Victor was a very small child, Cynthia was a gifted sorceress, and she wanted to strike back at the Baron and his soldiers, so they were constantly persecuting her gypsy tribe. And she made a very ill-advised pact with a demon. They later tell you it's Mephisto. They kind of retcon that. And she wants more power so she can protect her clan. And the demon gives her the power, but of course, any deal with a satanic figure, there's a downside to that. And when she uses her new powers and wipes out some of the Baron's troops, she also inadvertently kills every child in a nearby Latvarian village. Every child dies. And she's obviously horrified at what's happened. She runs off, and then one of the Baron's soldiers kills her. And because of this pact she made, she's damned to eternal suffering in the underworld. And of course, one of the key crux of, as Byrne mentioned, of Doom's character is he is constantly, every year, there's an annual tradition, he goes into the netherworld to fight to free his mother's soul. We'll talk later about the classic story, Triumph and Torment, where Stern really explores that classic aspect of Doom's history. Now, when Cynthia dies, Werner is afraid that Victor, will inherit his mother's appetite for the dark arts. And he tries to shield his son from, his mother's sorceress legacy. It's cut short, though, because Werner is summoned to the Baron's castle in the capital of Latvaria because the Baron's wife is dying of some terminal illness. And Werner knows that he can't save the woman. And so he tends to her, but then he leaves because he knows she's going to die. And he goes to us and he goes, look, we have to get out of here because once this woman dies, the Baron's going to come for us. Because the Baron was already persecuting their gypsy clan as it was. And they flee. And this is all in the Lee Kirby original annual. And which you can find in older printings of Byrne on the Bad Guys. I don't know if there's any modern reprints of it. Or in Marvel Masterworks, for example. And Werner flees with his son. They're being hunted by the Baron's soldiers. It's a brutal winter time, and they're starting to freeze to death. Werner removes his own shirt or coat, wraps around his son to save his life, and then they're found by their fellow gypsies, including Boris, who is Werner's best friend, who becomes Doom's faithful retainer as Doom grows up. And Werner is dying from exposure, but because he wrapped up Victor survives. And as he's dying, he tells his son, he's trying to warn him not to follow the dark path, essentially. But Doom doesn't get the message, and as his father dies, he swears vengeance, all right, for what's happened to his family. And what happens there is that Doom, as he grows up, it becomes clear that, he's a genius. And he finds his mother's trunk dealing with her passion for the mystic arts. And he starts to experiment with that. And he also starts to experiment with science. And we're introduced to both Boris, who becomes Doom's most faithful retainer, and also very important character in Doom's history, Valeria, who I'm not sure, honestly, when Valeria first appeared. Do you have that information?
I have it in my notes.
Please, sir. Fire away.
Oh, okay. It was Marvel Superheroes number 20. Cover dated May of '69. The story's entitled "This Man, This Demon," and it reveals more details of Doom's history, Doom's origin.
Okay.
And that is where the character of Valeria is introduced. It was written by Larry Lieber, Stan Lee's brother.
Oh, wow.
And the cover is a big image.
I know
of
the
Dr.
cover.
Doom.
He's holding his fists high up. Yep.
Yes, he's dominating the entire cover the way he dominates everything with which he's involved.
And it's revealed that this is kind of over time. This comes out, and it's not just all in one story necessarily. That Doom and Valeria grew up together, and they were childhood friends, and then they became sweethearts. And Valeria is probably the only person that Doom felt, besides his parents, he felt any kind of, let's say, semblance of love for, and that it could draw some kind of humanity out of him, basically. Now, this is important to note because what happens to Valeria later on, you're really going to appreciate what Doom becomes, essentially, and what lengths he's willing to go to. And he becomes the leader of their gypsy clan, and he uses his inherent genius to craft weapons to protect them. And in the Lee Kirby origin, they show one where he creates like this grenade that when it hits, it creates like an ice effect to freeze people. And he stays one step ahead of the Baron's troops with his clan as they travel around the Balkans and Latvaria. And he studies sorcery, but he starts to lean more towards science as the prime source of his power. And what happens, and this is all the origin, the United States hears about Doom, and in the original story, a college recruiter comes and says, look, we want to bring you to the United States. You'll have access to the state-of-the-art laboratories and so forth, scholarship, and Doom agrees to go there to take advantage of that. Now, later on in the books of Doom, Brubaker establishes that not only does he go to college, but also the U.S. military also secretly has him working for them to develop weapons as well, which makes sense because that probably would have happened. And, of course, when we get to State University, he meets Reed Richards and Ben Grimm. Ben is, of course, the big man on campus, the football star in college. Reed, of course, is another prodigy. And Reed, tries to strike up a friendship with just, hey, why don't we room together? And Doom says, I want nothing to do with you, etc. I want my privacy. And they become intellectual rivals. Although you get the sense that it's more Doom who feels the rivalry than Reed necessarily. It's clear that Reed recognized that Doom is brilliant, but he doesn't share the same egomania that Doom has. Now, Reed definitely has an ego, but it's nowhere near the level of Doom's. Gentlemen, I don't want to dominate. Anybody wants to jump in any time, please feel free.
Don't want to interrupt your flow.
Thank you, sir. So, as we mentioned, Doom, of course, is obsessed with contacting his mother's soul. The explosion occurs. He's kicked out of State University. He goes, you have nothing else to teach me anyway. And now, of course, he's wearing bandages around his face because regardless of how little or much he's disfigured, his vanity cannot take the fact that he is now ugly facially. So he then travels around the world and eventually ends up, through a hideous effort of will, he goes deep into Tibet, nearly kills him, dealing with the elements. And I remember in the Brubaker version, he has to fight a Yeti, for example. And, of course, he always has technological wonders with him. He uses weapons that he creates out of, spare parts or God knows what. And he finds an order of sort of mystical Tibetan monks who have apparently been up there for centuries. And he's heard whispers of their mastery of science and sorcery and the combination of the two. And he spends years with them, learns all their secrets, and then, of course, he becomes the master. He takes control of the order of monks. They help him create his infamous armor and his weaponry. And again, the armor is Doom essentially ceasing to be Victor Von Doom and now becoming Dr. Doom. And Brubaker, it's never addressed really that why does Doom call, besides the fact that it just sounds fun, classic supervillain, why is he called Dr. Doom? Brubaker addresses that in Books of Doom. He's watching a newscast, and Reed Richards has become like a famous scientist, and he's called Dr. Reed Richards, and then Doom goes to his minions. He goes, "You will now refer to me as Dr. Doom." So even there, the ego is so monumental. He cannot it's brilliant by Brubaker. He cannot tolerate the fact that Reed Richards has a doctorate and he doesn't. So he's now Dr. Doom.
Just summarily confers a doctorate upon himself.
And he forges the armor. And the armor, of course, also represents Doom. And he says, pain is for lesser men. And the armor is just him sort of walling himself off from all those weaker emotions, like his love for Valeria, for example. Because basically he renounces Valeria. He says, she's a distraction to what he needs to do. And the mask, of course, not only hides his disfigurement, which he can't abide, but also he's not just a man now. He's something else. He is this sort of higher being as he sees himself. And the armor, of course, besides being a symbol, is also a highly sophisticated offensive-defensive computer system, basically, containing all kinds of weaponry, both offensive and defensive, and it's also, of course, terrifying. And it becomes, both a symbol and a tool in his campaigns of conquest. Now, Doom then returns to Latvaria, and as we're going to learn, he swiftly overthrows the monarchy. He murders the king whose policies had led to the deaths of his parents. In the Books of Doom, they show you Doom just strangles him, and then he takes, the king was wearing the green cloak with the famous gold-colored chain that kind of holds it together, and then Doom dons the cloak, and then he's Dr. Doom. Now, we should note that in FF number 5, his first appearance, he doesn't appear as we know Dr. Doom today. He has the armor, but he's wearing a sort of different type. He has like a hood, but it's more like a tunic rather than, Murd, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right. No, I'm just nodding in agreement. That's exactly how I describe it, too, with that sort of crenellated shoulder cape thing as opposed to an actual cloak.
Yes. But Brubaker, when he does his respectful, I emphasize respectful retconning in Books of Doom, the cloak was worn by the former king of Latvaria, who Doom murders. Now, I want to talk, before we get more into appearances, I want to talk a bit about Doom's powers and his skill sets, because different writers have developed Doom to the point where he has so many different abilities, and he's so gifted in so many different ways, and it makes him such, even though he doesn't have, super strength per se, although his armor gives him some strength, or, it's not like he has, tremendous superpowers. He has so many different abilities that make him one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous adversaries any Marvel hero is going to face. All right, now, I want to ask you guys this. Based on all the reading we've done over the years, do you think Doom's intellect is the greatest in the Marvel Universe besides Reed Richards, or do you think Tony Stark, Hank Pym, Banner, are they all kind of in the same, what do you guys think, all in the same era, or are they kind of a little bit lesser? It always seems like Richards and Doom are held up as the two smartest people in the Marvel Universe.
They're in a league of their own.
Yeah, I think
so?
they are. I think they're above the rest.
Yeah, superior Iron Man be damned. He's not quite in their class.
Yeah. That's the impression I've always had as well.
As much as I think they could beat Doom, mostly because of his shortcomings that he does have,
yeah.
I still think when it comes dollars to donuts that Reed and Doom are above the rest.
That's the interpretation I've always taken with it as well. Although I've noticed over the years, they've really, and probably part of this is the movies too, they've really gone to great lengths to really emphasize Tony Stark's genius as well. I mean, they've always done that, but originally it was just, he built weapons, but now in more recent times, like, he's also inventing, all kinds of other technologies, and I'm kind of dreading that new comic, I got to tell you, Superior Iron Man, but I'll give it a chance. Doom is both a scientific genius, a technological genius. I mean, he invents stuff probably every day, essentially. I mean, all kinds of weapons, but also things that help his kingdom in terms of giving his people, peace, prosperity, and security, which he feels is all that they need. Not freedom, just peace, prosperity, and security. And when Doom took power in Latvaria, what we have to remember is, in the Marvel Universe, Latvaria is a superpower. It is literally on par with the United States and other great countries in the Marvel world, because Doom controls the country. And even though Latvaria is, you get the impression, is like a postage stamp sized country in the Balkans, with the capital city renamed Doomstot, of course. Great. The ego it's so entertaining.
Otisburg?
Well done, sir. Otisburg. It's just a little place. There's Tessmacher's.
How dare you compare Doom to Ned Beatty?
But Latvaria becomes this high-tech... I mean, it maintains its charming sort of medieval, rustic outer look. Doom has his castle on the hill and so forth. Yeah. But underneath all that is the most sophisticated technology in the world, besides probably what's in the Baxter Building.
Or possibly in Wakanda.
Or Wakanda. Oh, geez, Mert, I just disgraced myself. Well done, sir. I should have noted that. And in fact, the fact that the Black Panther and Doom are both kings, some writers have had a lot of fun with that dynamic.
Including,
Christopher Priest? Yes. It's like I'm a satire of myself now. We just have to,
Of which I've never read. Never.
Really?
Never.
All right, we'll help you out.
Okay.
We got a Black Panther spotlight coming down the road. We may have to book, extra time.
Oh, absolutely.
That one. But so Latvaria, the weapons, the robots, Doom has his mechanical secret police who patrol Latvaria, and if you step out of line, you're in trouble. And they've been rendered in classic Kirby ways over the years. Sort of like these menacing, like, I don't know if you call them teeth, but just the way the visage is. Even like if you look at Doom's mask. Well, I found always the most frightening thing about his mask was the mouthpiece, because when he opens the mask mouth, it's not like you see his actual human mouth. It's like this mechanical apparatus of...
Yeah, like, where is his teeth?
Yeah, like
where are his teeth?
The only other part of Doom's face you see are his eyes, and you see the scarring around his eyes.
Yeah,
everything else is just a mechanical man. I mean, and I always found the Doom mouth, the mask, frightening, because they're not teeth, but there's just all kind of gears moving in there and so forth.
And he's just constantly like, like I don't know how to do it. You guys see me making the face, but just constantly growling.
And this is where Jack Kirby's unparalleled imagination so serves us well, because his renditions, and as Kirby has his style, changed and evolved, Doom did it as well in the way he would render Doom, and that sinister grandeur. So if you go to Latvaria, not that we're going to be tourists there anytime soon, but there's all kinds of technological wonders, and always one of Doom's most important inventions, of course, is his time machine, and that appears in his first appearance in Doctor Doom Fantastic Four number 5. Doom would love to take over Reed Richards' book and have it named after him, of course, but Doom has used the time machine many times to travel back in time to meet people like Morgan Le Fay and learn their secrets, and then come back to the present, essentially. As Murd mentioned, Another one of Doom's greatest strengths and also his weaknesses is his ego. And I mean, writers have done so much over the years with developing Doom's ego and what it means. I mean, Murd is right. I mean, it is the core of the character. Murd, would you agree? I mean, that ego is that's Dr. Doom essentially.
It's what defines him for me.
Yeah,
certainly.
It drives him in every way, not only in terms of all his amazing advances, but also many of his greatest defeats and weaknesses because of the ego, essentially. And the rivalry with Reed Richards, or as Doom refers to him, Richards, so is rooted in that egomania. You know, Richards scarred my face. Richards ruined my experiment to reach my mother's soul. You know, Richards is stealing, my thunder. You know, I'm a doctor because how dare he? And so forth. It's Richards, and Richards is the source of all of Doom's failings, and it's not Doom's fault. It can't be Doom's fault. It's never Doom's fault.
For Doom is infallible.
Yeah, Doom is infallible. Exactly. It's Richards. All right, and the obsession, and sometimes it's goofily done depending on who's writing, but of Doom to take on the Fantastic Four and defeat them, to demonstrate once and for all who is the master, who is the intellectual master. And if Doom didn't defeat the Fantastic Four, then it can't be Doom's fault. There's something else happened to prevent him from gaining his place in the sun that, of course, he should have because he is Doom. Now, I've noted that we should note that because Dr. Doom is portrayed in many different ways, and Murd is mentioned in some writers' hands is very clumsily, very one-dimensional, But in the best writers, Doom is a very complicated character. He's a character that, on the one hand, you can't forget is a cold-blooded murderer. I mean, Dr. Doom has killed many people, both his own people and people outside Latvaria throughout his various machinations. But he's also a man who has his own code of honor. And one thing that many writers emphasize that when Dr. Doom gives his word, you can die by it. He will not break his word. But of course, he'll give his word in such a way that he only will follow precisely what he exactly said. So he may be doing something you think appears merciful or is generous, but what exactly did he actually pledge to do for you, right? And that's all he's actually going to do,
It's the classic deal with the devil trope.
Exactly. And there have been cases where Doom has appeared noble, merciful, generous, but you have to always question what is the agenda. Is it just because he's feeling human and magnanimous, or is there some other interest he's pursuing? Almost always it's the latter in most cases. And I've always felt that Dr. Doom, while he's really in many ways a terrifying villain, if he wasn't in the Marvel Universe, it'd be a lesser place. Because for me, he's like the bar when it comes to a supervillain. And other villains I love, the Green Goblin, for example, or Thanos and so forth. But there's just something about Doom that when I see him in a story, I'm automatically excited to read it because, what is he going to do? I mean, it's because even though Doom has a code, there's also an unpredictability because you're never sure is what he's doing. Is it for himself? Is it somehow going to benefit his own people? Is it what sometimes he'll show you sometimes sense like he has respect for Susan Richards. He'll often call her Susan, and you can almost sense that he has not that she's an equal, but that he kind of respects the fact that she'll go to great lengths to defend her family. And he'll often comment on how your control of your powers is impressive, and so forth. Almost in a way, he respects her more than he does Richards.
Maybe he senses how important she is to Richards.
That's an excellent point, Murd. Excellent point. But Doom has his own code of honor. His word is his solemn pledge, and even Richards has said many times, Doom will keep his word, essentially, when he gives it. Now, Doom, we mentioned the people of Latvaria, which is a running theme in the whole history of Dr. Doom. It seems that he does love them, and he takes his role as a monarch and the head of a nation seriously. He's the head of state, and he will do what he has to protect his people. But there must be obedience at all times, and don't question. And if you don't question and you're obedient, Health, happiness, and prosperity will be yours. There's many famous scenes of Doom walking grandly, the cape flowing behind him, Boris by his side, through Doomstadt, and all the people flowing flowers at him, and, oh, master, and, they're taking their hats off as he comes by, and,
mandatory show of affection.
Police officers saluting him, and, it's kind of, it's genuine, but there's also the fear that's there as well. Doom has employed a variety of retainers throughout his long history. The most famous, of course, are the robots, the various often deadly machines he creates to enforce his will, like his robotic secret police. Boris, the old gypsy, is like his most faithful human minion. And you sense Doom does have affection for him because Boris was his father's best friend, and Boris kind of raised him. Although, many times you sense when they have Boris kind of speak on his own, he acknowledges the terror that Doom really is, and how, you kind of get the sense that he's loyal to Doom because he's known Doom since he was a child, and Doom is the head of their clan, but he also fears Doom, and he knows that Doom is, he's terrifying, but he's bound to him for his entire life, basically. Another fun part, and you get the sense that Doom does have regular human agents and soldiers and who pop up in different capacities throughout his various appearances in a wide variety of uniforms, depending on who's drawing the stories. But we get the sense that Latvaria is a very small country with a relatively small population, which only shows you how powerful Doom is, that he's basically elevated to the status of a superpower, all right, because of his technological genius. And, of course, as the head of state, and Stanley always had fun with this, Doom has diplomatic immunity. Wherever he goes, he is the head of a nation. He's the legitimate head of Latvaria, so he can't be arrested. He's essentially untouchable. And there's a classic moment in Amazing Spider-Man 50, Volume 2 by Straczynski and Romita Jr., where they have Captain America escorting Doom, much to Captain America's chagrin, while he's in the United States on a diplomatic mission. And the Cap even makes a joke about, do you always talk about yourself in the third person? And Shane mentioned, of course, the Doombots, one of the great plot devices of the Doctor Doom history. I would hazard a guess that a significant portion of Doom's appearances, it wasn't actually Doctor Doom. Would you guys say that's probably a fair assessment?
Yeah.
And, sometimes they tell you on the spot it's not Doom. Many times they retcon that wasn't Doom. It was a Doombot. And the whole role of the Doombots is they're proxies. If Doom feels he's going to be in a situation where maybe it's a little too dangerous, or it's not even worth his time, or it's beneath his notice, or it's amusing him, he'll dispatch a Doombot. And the Doombots are such sophisticated artificial intelligence, they think they are Dr. Doom. And they're programmed to believe they're Doom and to act as Doom would. So in good writers' hands, they get a lot of mileage out of the Doombots. A lot of mileage. Anybody have any more comments on the role of the Doombot? Or...
Only that when Marvel Legends figures came out, I loved that you could get a Doom or a Doombot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You really didn't know until you opened it up.
And what distinguished
did the faceplate come off?
Yeah, the faceplate came off, and there was a humanish type face underneath, or there was a robotic one.
Was the human face scarred?
A little bit, but not as much as what you would think it would be.
Okay.
If I remember right. That particular Marvel Legend is, I think, one of very few that I've kept, because I just love the way they did it.
I'd love to get my hands on one of those. I'll have to look for that. I mentioned Doom's armor, which is that's the trademark of Dr. Doom is his armor. You can't even call it a costume. That kind of seems beneath what it is, right? It's his kingly robes. It's the symbol of his trying to slough off any kind of humanity, really, to kind of elevate himself as he sees it above those lesser feelings and emotions and pains and so forth. It's a highly advanced defensive weapon system, self-contained life support, computers. And over the years, writers have had all kinds of fun with what Doom's armor can actually do. And, of course, it's very convenient. You can come up with pretty much anything because he's a genius that he can then use the armor for. So it's often been established many times. It gives Doom enhanced strength. We've seen issues where the Doom is actually going toe-to-toe with the Thing, for example, because of the armor, and durability. Of course, most people know he can project sort of like concussive force blasts from his gauntlets. It has a defensive force field, which he can trigger to protect himself, which is incredibly powerful. He has a jetpack, so he can fly with the armor. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's just some of the most famous characteristics of his armor. One fun bit of trivia I'd forgotten about in the classic Captain Britain and what's the name of that?
M13.
Thank you. I can't believe I just forgot. M13. Thank you. Which I was raving about that series in an earlier episode. It only had about 15 issues, but Paul Cornell wrote it. And the culminating arc involves Dracula trying to invade Britain. And as part of his political preparation for his invasion, Dracula meets with Doom on the moon. And because Dracula wants to ensure that Doom will interfere with his plans. And Doom is contemptuous of Dracula because he sees Dracula as a false monarch. You have to remember that Doom is also like a nobleman, essentially. And so he's a snob, too. And he basically tells Dracula, look, in his own pontificating way, I have fragments of the true cross in my armor, so don't even try anything because I've studied under all the various people who've told me how to deal with vampires. So he also apparently has fragments of the cross, the crucified Christ, built into his armor to protect himself from vampires and other otherworldly beings, which I thought was fantastic. The other key element here is Doom is a sorcerer. They've established he's not as adept as Doctor Strange, for example. He's not, the sorcerer supreme. But he's done enough study that he's a formidable mystic artist. And, of course, he's a quick study. He can learn fast. And he inherited his mother's penchant for the mystic arts. And over the years with the Tibetan monks, Doctor Strange himself, which we'll talk about, and through time traveling, like he spent time with Morgan Le Fay, he's learned a lot of magical secrets. And, again, he brings those to the fore when necessary. And Merge, you're probably familiar with this. It's established early on that Doom can transfer his mind.
Yes.
Why don't you go on with that?
He came upon that ability fairly early in his career, actually. His first handful of appearances, safely in the early 60s.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, he learned how to do this from an alien race called the Ovoids.
That's right. Yep.
And from the planet Burkeel. And these aliens are so advanced that they've developed beyond distrust of other beings. They're just sort of universally benevolent and naive, and so they just willingly teach Doom this miraculous technique that's allowed them to live for centuries and centuries by simply transmitting their consciousness from one body to another as the old ones wear out. And Doom, of course, uses this offensively to his own advantage.
Now, does the other person's mind go into the other, transfer the bodies too?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it's a switch. It's a mind switch.
Because he did that with Daredevil in the Silver Age. There was a story where, even in the Silver Age, they started establishing Doom's stature by having him appear in other characters' books. You mentioned Amazing Spider-Man 5, for example, which is early on in Spidey's run, where Doom transferred minds with Daredevil, and it was a crossover between, I think, Daredevil and the Fantastic Four, where I think the FF thought that Daredevil was still Doom and he wasn't, and wackiness ensued, and the classic Marvel misunderstanding.
Right.
But are there other powers of Doom that I haven't touched upon you want to address that you feel are significant? Or?
No, I don't think so. You've mentioned the time machine, the energy blasts, the sorcery. Yep, I think we've covered the really significant.
All righty.
Of course,
it's also important to note that even without his armor and weapons, Doom is a formidable because Doom he's a political and military genius. I mean, he's a master strategist and tactician. He's a highly skilled hand-to-hand combatant, even without his armor. Again, this is someone who was, as we've mentioned, besides Reed Richards, is probably the smartest person in the Marvel universe. So even if he's just in a room, isolated, naked, he's dangerous because he's going to find some way to turn whatever situation is to his advantage.
Yes, there's one Doom moment from the early 2000s that will underscore that point, Chris, and we'll get to that.
Oh, I look forward to it. So, again, we just wanted to touch upon sort of the general overview of the Doctor Doom character, and I want, unless you guys have other things to add, I kind of want to go into our primer, our reading list.
No, go right ahead.
And again, I apologize if people are looking forward to an exhaustive checklist. It's
almost incomprehensible.
700 appearances. That's what Marvel Wiki told me. That based on their
Such an
information,
undertaking would exhaust the hosts, not only the material.
Yeah. And based on the importance and stature of Doom, I believe that stat. That's probably accurate or approximate because he showed up in frickin' Dazzler. Okay, he was in every Marvel title I don't know if he appeared in Howard the Duck or not. Not sure about that one, but he's been in most of them. Sometimes, multiple times. I'm Luke Cage, Hero for Hire. He was in there. Pay me my money. But
where's my money, honey?
But, and of course the Fantastic Four many, many times. The Avengers, Spider-Man. He's had appearances in the X-Men. All over the map. Dr. Doom. So I went through a lot of my Doom appearances in my personal library, and I picked out ones that I thought were either A, very significant, and or just tremendous stories that should be read. And there's quite a few, and it was a little bit of a sort of bittersweet chore to try to figure out, what are the best ones we should be noting. And I'm sure Murd has some great stuff to add as well. You got to start at the beginning. Fantastic Four number 5, 1962, Lee and Kirby. It's the first appearance of Doom and his time machine. Now, in the story, Reed briefly alludes to Doom's origin. He mentions they went to college together, but they don't do much more of it than that at that point. Now, I remember we were doing our FF Silver Age Spotlight, and Jamie was commenting on he found that the origin of Dr. Doom kind of goofy, because he sends them to the time of Blackbeard the pirate so they can get Blackbeard's treasure chest. And I think he's holding Sue Storm hostage, and the FF dresses up as pirates. The Thing puts on a black beard, and so forth.
And he remarks that it feels natural.
Yes, and I think they promised Doom they would bring him the chest, because he asked for the treasure chest, but when they brought it back, the treasure wasn't in it. But Doom still honored his word because they brought him the chest rather than what was actually inside it. So that right at the beginning they establish, the word of Doom, essentially. The very next issue, they bring him back again. So Lee and Kirby must have liked him, because they wouldn't have gotten fan mail yet about that issue, probably.
Yeah,
so
no, probably not.
They must have been taken with him right from the beginning. And the visual Kirby design was great. I mean, the mask, the gauntlets. And as Murd mentioned, the first appearance, he has a different sort of outer garment. But then when we go to FF6, he's in the classic I shouldn't have called it costume. Doom would be angry with me. All right, in his armor,
robes of state.
Yes, well done, sir.
Regalia, perhaps.
Well done. And the first issue is the team up, the first, I guess, supervillain team up in Marvel Comics of the Silver Age. I would think Dr. Doom and Namor the Submariner. And Namor was never really a gung-ho ally of Dr. Doom, really. I think they turn on each other pretty quickly. But that's a classic cover, the two of them going at it against the FF. Issue 10, Doom swaps bodies with Reed. And that's a classic story because Lee and Kirby put themselves into the book. We talked about this in our FF Spotlight, and Doom actually goes to the Marvel offices and threatens them and so forth. They break the fourth wall. And on the cover, they have Reed leering because there's actually Doom inside Reed's body and so forth. That's the power Reed mentioned. Excuse me, Reed Murd mentioned. Excuse me, sir.
I know, the resemblance is telling. Sure.
Fabulous. I mentioned FF Annual 2, which 1964 is the Lee Kirby origin of Dr. Doom, which is still very much relevant, and it's a great annual. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best origins Lee and Kirby did, which Brubaker will expand upon many years later. Issues 50, and we're in the 1960s here, the Silver Age. Issues 57 to 60 are very important. That's when Doom steals the power of the Silver Surfer. And the second FF movie clumsily picked up on that plot line a little bit. But the Kirby, this is Kirby at the height of his Fantastic Four rendering. The art is unbelievable in these stories. He shows Doom's workshop and all these insane, wild inventions. And, there's a classic splash page of Doom standing triumphantly over the server's prone form as he revels in the cosmic power now encased in his body. And it's a classic. And issues 84 to 87, near the end of the Silver Age, near the end of the Kirby run, the FF end up in Latvaria, and you see beautiful, breathtaking splash pages of Latvaria. Kirby really gets into showing us Latvaria and Doomstot. And there's a famous scene where Doom has Crystal, because Crystal's with the team at this point, and Sue. they're in his castle, and he entertains them. He invites them to dinner. There's a beautiful splash page of Doom in profile and his chefs with caviar and all these sumptuous foods. And he invites them to dinner. And in that story, he lets the FF go because if he hadn't, their battle would have destroyed all his precious looted artwork. And shows that Doom is a lover of the arts. They have issues where Doom is playing the piano. Doom is painting. Doom is listening to concerts given to him by his subjects. So Doom is also a cultured supervillain as well. And contemptuous of those who are not cultured. As we move into the Bronze Age of the 1970s, and Murd, jump in any time if you'd like.
Okay, I'd like to jump in right now before we leave the Silver Age behind. Let's just throw out another mention of that Amazing Spider-Man appearance.
Yes.
Because that was Amazing Spidey number 5, and it was cover dated, October of 1963. So this is very early in Spider-Man's career, as you said, but also very early in Doom's own existence, because he had existed as a character for 15 months at that time. And yet the cover blurb proclaims, "It had to happen. Sooner or later, Spider-Man was bound to battle Dr. Doom." So even at this early point in the Marvel Universe's development, its architects, primarily Stan Lee, of course, have already gotten the idea that Dr. Doom was the gold standard of supervillainy. So
and that tradition will continue right through the present day. I mean, in terms of his appearances in other characters' books, basically.
So he just made a very early impression.
Yeah.
I was going to mention Avengers number 25, when Dr. Doom actually clashes with the Avengers for the first time. I remember that cover, And it's established that that's when, in flashback, his meeting with Rama Tut, the Time Father, is related.
Yes. Okay.
Where we first get the idea that perhaps Rama Tut, who we later learn is actually Kang the Conqueror in an earlier phase of his development, might possibly be the same person as Von Doom. I think Doom actually encouraged that belief. And it later teased that perhaps Kang is just a descendant of Dr. Doom's.
And faithful listeners, of course, we did our best to disentangle all of that. We discussed our Avengers Forever Book of the Month episodes, which I'm proud of those. That was
a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun, and an epic adventure.
And finally got me to read it.
Go ahead, Bert. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's all I got for Silver Age stuff. So moving on to the Bronze Age.
In the Bronze Age, FF116, that's the month where they had the classic 25-cent issues which had more pages in them for that 1 month, the glue-bound covers, which are always highly sought and high grade on the back issue market. And it's a classic cover with Dr. Doom leading the FF into battle. Reed Richards is not present because, we talked about this in our Bronze Age Spotlight, Reed is in the thrall of the alien Overmind. So the FF have to actually go to Doom for help, because it's Doom, to help them battle the Overmind, because the Overmind also threatens Doom's interests, of course, as well. He's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart. And Doom actually leads the FF to help free Reed from the Overmind. One story I forgot about that's lesser known but important is Astonishing Tales number 8 from the early 70s, which became a Dr. Doom and I think and Kazar showcase book, if I remember correctly.
It was from the first issue, actually. Yeah, so the first, I think issue 8 was the last time that Doom co-featured with Kazar there.
Yeah. And in issue 8, it's written by Jerry Conway, mainstay Marvel writer of the Bronze Age. Gene Coling and Tom Palmer rendering Dr. Doom. Wow. Beautiful. And it's Doom's yearly quest. They show the quest to free his mother. And he descends to the bowels of his castle to conduct the ritual, which he does once a year. And in this story, of course, he fails. And he says, all right, well, he's going to do it to try it again next year. But it's a story that really, again, captures sort of the haunted, tragic aspect of the Dr. Doom character, that he, with all his genius, he can't free his mother's soul. And it torments him, basically. Have you any notes on Astonishing Tales, Murd? Or?
Well, let's see. In the first issue, he encounters Prince Rudolfo.
Yes.
A semi-recurring antagonist. He's the son of the Baron/King/Monarch that Doom kills and deposes in that order to become absolute ruler of Latvaria. So Rodolfo thinks he has greater right to rule Latvaria, so he leads kind of a Latvian underground. It becomes a minor thorn in Doom's side for a while. And in issues 5, 6, and 7, there's a story in which Doom goes up against the Red Skull. another
yes.
another
And there's a
will
Nazi
to power type.
And as a Nazi,
triumph
the
of
Red
will.
Skull, of course, is prejudiced against gypsies. So,
Yes, because they were on the Nazi Party's hit list.
yes,
were
they were.
not?
Yes, they were.
So, yes, it's understandable that there would be bad blood, to say the least,
Yeah.
between these two. And the Skull is another would-be world beater, so he sets his sights on Latvaria and is, of course, repelled. And this would not be the last time either.
Well, I was going to ask you, as we're in the Bronze Age, about supervillain team-up. Because don't the Red Skull and Doom, aren't they featured in that book multiple times?
Yes. Well, I mean, the whole series lasted only like 17 issues.
Right. Yeah.
And the last couple of issues, Red Skull actually took over as the headliner. Not
He did,
surprising
okay.
that it kind of was canceled shortly after that,
Yeah.
with the Red Skull as your star. But yeah, in Supervillain Team Up, there was an arc, I think lasting about 3 issues, in which the Red Skull did invade and actually take control of Latvaria. And Doom had to wrest control back from him, which he did fairly handily. Oh, he had to go all the way to the moon to do it, but such a thing as a trifle for Doom.
Of course. But there's a many times, and that was I've only read bits and pieces of that series. That's a fun series, the supervillain team up.
It is. Yeah. And like its, I would call it its analog series over at DC Comics, Secret Society of Supervillains, it did kind of suffer from a lack of creative stability. It never it wasn't able to keep a consistent creative team on board.
I want to say John Byrne was involved in the end of that series, if I remember correctly. I think, or maybe a cover. I'm not
possibly.
positive. Yeah.
That's likely.
Yeah.
Peter B. Gillis wrote the last couple of issues. Bill Mantlo wrote a few.
Of course.
I think Jim Shooter wrote one. Englehart was involved, I believe. So a whole bunch of different hands on the wheel. And then Keith Giffen, young Keith Giffen, drew some of the issues. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy quilt of creative influences, and so it went in a lot of different directions during its short run. But it was dominated for most of its run by Doom and Submariner team-ups.
That's right.
And it's really, when Doom is involved, it's really less a supervillain team-up. It should have been called like supervillain vassalage, because Doom found a way to subvert Namor to his will.
Yeah.
This was Namor's continuity at that time was the status quo was that his Atlantean people had fallen into a sort of chemically induced coma as a result of a nerve gas that fell upon Atlantis as a result of Namor's headstrong attack upon a surface water-going vessel that was carrying this nerve gas. And so he accidentally put his entire supporting cast out of submission. So he actually approached Doom about an alliance at first. And Doom initially rebuffed him. That was in Giant Size Supervillain Team Up number 1. And in Giant Size number 2, Doom came to him and said he'd changed his mind.
I didn't realize there were 2 Giant Size books for Supervillain Team Up.
There were. Before there was an ongoing series, there were
Okay.
those 2 Giant Size specials.
Okay.
And they were both Doom and Submariner. And so eventually an alliance was forged, but it didn't take long before Doom gained the upper hand in the partnership and said, all right, you know what, you're going to be my thrall and do as I tell you, or your Atlantean people will never be healed. But Doom did at least give his word that he would eventually help Submariner's people and revive them.
The word of Doom.
Yes.
Interesting enough, when we get into the 2000s, we'll return to the relationship between Atlantis and Latvaria, because they do more with that, actually. I'm sorry, Mer, go ahead, please.
I was just about finished, but,
Okay.
but another example of Doom dominating whatever partnership he's a part of, that there was one issue that co-featured Doom and Magneto, and that also involved Doom basically taking control of Magneto's nervous system using a special nerve gas that he but he allowed Magneto his free will for the rest of that issue just because it amused him to do so. And the two of them played a little game together that embroiled the Avengers and the Champions, and I think it actually was continued in an issue of the Champions, because that was the last issue of the supervillain team-up for that time, and then it was brought back many months later on, and those were the 2 vestigial issues featuring the Red Skull.
Yeah, I don't think they've reprinted that series anytime in recent memory. I don't know if they ever have. Maybe they did it as Marvel. I think they did a Marvel Essential of it. They did do a Marvel Essential.
I think I remember that.
Yes, they did. I take that back. But I don't know if that's still in print. If it is, they're fun, though, the ones I've read. Murd, thank you very much, sir.
Certainly. You had it in your notes, Murd. Please,
of course,
step to the podium, and I do not wish to disappoint the maestro.
You never do, brother. Another major Bronze Age event is FF 198 to 200. where Doom hatches a and this is one of those classic storylines where the FF have broken up and they come back together, and Doom has created a clone that he kind of considers his son, but the clone turns on him, so Doom then kills the clone, and it ends up being an epic battle in FF200 between Doom and Reed. And there's an uprising, as Murd mentioned. The Latvian underground comes out into the open, and Rudolfo's brother Zorba. I guess Rudolfo's dead by this point.
Yeah, the Red Skull kills him in Supervillain
Okay,
Team-Up.
thank you. Zorba is now leading the resistance, and working with the FF, they're actually overthrowing Doom's regime. And Doom and Reed go into this final epic battle, and Doom's mask is ripped off, and he's in a room with all these mirrors, and the multiple images of his reflection basically drive him mad. And he ends up, in a cell in Zorba's castle, and Zorba becomes the monarch. Now, we leave issue 200 thinking that Zorba's going to be a benevolent monarch for Latvaria, that they might even have democratic elections and so forth. That's what you think's going to happen. Of course not. All right, power corrupts. And now we enter the 80s, and it's the Byrne Era. And stay tuned down the road for what Dan will intend to be for our dear beloved comrade Jamie D, the mother of all spotlights, FF in the 80s, Byrne. We're going to do that one justice, ladies and gentlemen. But FF 236 to 237, Doom has returned, and he's escaped from his mental self-imprisonment in Latvaria. He gets away. And he actually traps the FF in he works with the puppet master, right? And the puppet master molds little bodies of the FF, and Doom captures the FF, puts their minds in these little puppets, and they have them in a role called Littleville. He has this, it's great Byrne art, this town is created, and the FF think, because their minds are in these bodies, they think they're living this life. They have no memory of their previous life. And Doom even plays the dean of the university Reed Richards works at, and of course he's very, domineering and obnoxious, because now he's Richard's boss, essentially. And ultimately, the FF escape. And there's a great scene where Sue Storm is invisible, and Doom is playing the organ. And she says, this music is so beautiful. And then she sees him without his mask. And, of course, being Doom, he senses that she's there, even though she's invisible. But again, there was emphasized, sort of that tragic grandeur of Doom and, his love of the arts and so forth. Now, the next issue, really missing Jamie so much right at this moment, as I always do, but especially right now, This Land Is Mine. Fantastic Four 246 to 247. One of the most important Dr. Doom stories of all time, in my opinion. Byrne again. We can all picture the cover where Doom is hulking over, the Latvaria, shouting, "This land is mine." And it turns out that Zorba is a corrupt dictator. He's mistreating his people. He's reactivated Doom's robots and using them against his own people. And the FF are convinced to come to Latvaria with Doom because he's told them, my people are being mistreated. And the FF feel responsible because they helped put Zorba on the throne. And it turns out that when they arrive in Doomstot, a woman runs out because her child accidentally hits Doom in the legs, and Doom's like, "Who dares?" And then, he backs off because it's a child, and the woman explains what's happened in his absence, and then one of the robots appears and murders the mother. Doom wipes out the robots with the FF, and the little boy is Christoph, who, as we all know, become basically Doom's adopted son and heir, essentially. And he's becomes a very complicated character in his own right.
Goes on to become a member of the Fantastic Four, eventually.
in the
90s during
not
the
not
DeFalco
the, not
run.
the best era, but yes, he
not
was a
by
member.
anyone's standards.
And then later he's involved in the Future Foundation, isn't he?
Probably.
Yeah. So Doom overthrows Zorba. The FF help because they're horrified that Doom is free and up and running again, but they realize that people of Latvaria actually are suffering, and that many of them will actually want Doom to come back to power. And there's a great scene where Doom Zorba's off his rocker, and he's trying to, he has this eye beam on his face. He's trying to fight Doom. It's hopeless, of course. And Doom grabs Zorba by the throat. They don't show you him kill him. And the FF appear and they say, where is Zorba? And Doom says something like, he's no longer of your concern. And you can imagine the grisly fate that he met.
Yeah.
And he says, get out of my land. You help me, but next time we meet, we will be enemies. It's a classic. Any Doom, if you want to put together Doom stories, that one is always in there. In FF 258, also the Byrne run. God, the Byrne run is so good. It's the first time in the Fantastic Four they're not in their own book. Appropriately, Dr. Doom dominates the entire book, and the cover is his gauntlet ripping the cover off of the Fantastic Four logo because he's taking over the book, essentially. And it's all about just a day in the life of Dr. Doom, the monarch of Latvaria. It's a fabulous one-shot. And it's also established that Kristoff is now Doom's ward, essentially. And he's essentially raising this child whose mother was killed in his presence.
And eventually he'll take the shortcut to child rearing and simply reprogram Kristoff's brain with his own brain patterns.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Now, other key 80s appearances that I wanted to mention, I'm sure, Murd, you have some as well. This has always been a fun story. Iron Man 149 to 150. Really fun. I believe this is the David Michelini, Bob Layton, John Romita Jr. classic era, where Doom and Iron Man are stranded in Camelot. And they end up, they meet King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay and so forth, and there's all kinds of intrigue. And Doom doesn't realize that Iron Man is Tony Stark, because no one knows Iron Man is Tony Stark at this point. And there's one scene where he's like, they're trying to reconstruct a time machine or something, and Doom's thinking, if Iron Man's this brilliant, Stark must be a genius, and he's thinking that. And it's a great, because they're both brilliant, but their character personalities are so different. And Doom holds Iron Man in contempt because he sees him as a lackey, because he doesn't realize he is Tony Stark. It's just a fun time travel story. And if you're going to talk about the 80s, you got to talk about Marvel Superhero Secret Wars.
Absolutely.
Murd, please. What do you think of that?
Well, it's just further evidence of that ego that I mentioned. Yeah, just Doom's absolute belief that he deserves to stand shoulder to shoulder with actual gods.
Galactus and the Beyonder.
He stops at nothing. He's captured by this clearly omnipotent being from beyond the human frame of reference. Yeah. In fact, that's how he introduces himself. I am from beyond, and so they name him the Beyonder. Yeah. He just gathers all these heroes and villains from Earth, plucks them out of their lives, and plops them down on this aggregate planet that he patches together
which
from
has a suburb of Denver in it.
Right, exactly. That's the bit of Earth that the Beyonder borrows to assemble this arena world for his assembled champions, and he just kind of pits them against each other just to figure out what makes them tick. To get into the mindset of these superhuman combatants that inhabit the planet Earth. And Doom doesn't have much time for this silly game he's been made a part of. He's already got his eye on a grander prize.
Yes.
Why just accept the table scraps the Beyonder offers the victors in this little conflict, these secret wars of his, when Doom can simply go straight to the source and usurp the power of the Beyonder himself. That is exactly what Doom manages to do. And briefly, he heals his own face.
That's right.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the things that he had in mind to do with the Beyonder's power. And I don't even remember now what happened to thwart him. Did it overload him somehow?
I remember him in final battle with Captain America. Doom was the leader of the villains. Cap was the leader of the heroes. He is defeated. Shane, do you remember?
I actually haven't read Secret Wars.
Ah. Someone can correct us on the forums, of course. Murd is going right for the book right now. It's a bound edition, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, indeed, a library-bound edition. Added to the CGS bookshelf by our colleague Matt, because he didn't want to make room for it in his house anymore.
Doom, of course, had that funky armor that they put on the action figure in the Secret Wars era.
Yes. But this also includes Secret Wars 2. So
I remember the funky action figure.
Yeah. I have to read Secret Wars again because it's been so many years. I have to wonder if it's going to hold up for me.
Well, and these are things that at the time I was reading in my early days of comics. It was all DC for me. I stayed away from most Marvel, and I came after Secret Wars had happened. It's one of those things on my bucket list to tackle and read finally.
I think it's safe to say there's other things you should probably read first.
Oh, absolutely, which is why I haven't done it yet.
But, I should read it again. It's been a long, long time. Bird, in that story, doesn't Doom actually take on Galactus too? I feel like he does in that saga. No need to get bogged down in it, but he's certainly defeated. I want to say he's consumed by his own power.
Okay, here it is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Claw gets to play Grima Wormtongue. And Claw, the master of sound, who is insane in this story because he had spent some time as just living sound waves reverberating around Galactus's infinitely large world ship, and that's driven him crazy. But he's kind of like the fool in King Lear's court, the fool who tells truth to power. He gets to he plants the seeds of thought in Doom's omnipotent mind. The possibility that perhaps the heroes that Doom consigned to oblivion found a way out. And by planting the seed in Doom's conscious mind, it sort of comes to pass that Doom's imagination finds it irresistible to see this scenario through to realization. And so Doom's sort of subconsciously brings Claw's hypothetical scenario to pass. The heroes are brought back to life. And he is, as you surmised earlier, Chris, locked in final battle with Captain America. And it looks like his armor is damaged.
Yeah, it's another. The story is another example of Doom's constant quest to seize ultimate power and harness it to his advantage. But my impression is that it just becomes too much for him because it's the Beyonder's power, for Pete's sake. So, but
it looks like the Beyonder took refuge in Claw's body.
Okay.
Okay.
So use Claw as a Trojan horse, so to speak. To regain
Trojan
his power.
horse and Sign-On all in one.
God, Secret Wars 2 was so awful. Holy mackerel. That one I don't need to read again. Marvel did an omnibus of that, by the way, Secret Wars 2.
And we did a series of footnotes episodes about it.
Of the first Secret Wars, not the second.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't. Angels Fear to Tread in Secret Wars 2. But personally, I kind of liked Secret Wars 2. I'm one of the few people I know who actually found some value in that story.
Sir, I would... Anything you find value in, to me, that means I have to give it at least a slight second look.
You have read it before, haven't you?
Yeah, when it came out. Secret Wars 2.
So it's been
a long time.
While.
Yeah. I just remember not liking it then, but, Be that as it may. This is a story I've mentioned a couple times on the air when we've talked about Doom or the Fantastic Four, the X-Men. I think it's an overlooked classic from the 1980s. It's Fantastic Four versus the X-Men. Marvel did a bunch of these miniseries in the 80s, Avengers versus X-Men, Mephisto versus whoever. This is done by Chris Claremont, a wonderful penciling by John Bogdanov. And in the X-Men universe, this was, remember, you recall from the Mutant Massacre story, Kitty Pryde had been caught in her phasing form and was basically starting to vanish from existence. And the X-Men are desperate, and they go to Reed Richards for help. But at this crucial moment, Reed Richards, his confidence is shattered because a journal was found by Sue that apparently Reed wrote, but he doesn't remember it, where Reed admits that he went up on the space mission on purpose, knowing they'd become hit by the cosmic rays because Earth would need superpowered defenders because Reed foresaw the approach of superpowered threats. So he purposely got his loved ones infected with the rays so they would develop powers. Of course, the FF is horrified by this, and they basically renounce Reed and Ben, of course, is crushed because this is like saying my friend transformed this monster on purpose. And they're called by the X-Men. Reed says, I can't help Kitty because his confidence is shattered because he doesn't believe in himself now because he can't remember writing the journal, but it's his handwriting, it's his book. And then Doom appears, and he says, I can cure Kitty. And the X-Men are desperate, and Reed's like, you can't, Storm, you mustn't. It's akin to making a deal with the devil. But they're desperate, and they bring her to Latvaria, and Doom, I'm going to save her, and so forth. Because to Doom, this is the final chance where he can show up Reed Richards playing the hero, saving the Kitty Pryde. And ultimately, the FF also go to Latvaria to try to make things right. I don't want to spoil the ending. If you love the Doctor Doom character, if you love the Fantastic Four, this is a classic. The art is beautiful. I think it's one of Claremont's best works, period. Read it. It was in softcover. I think now it's in one of those Marvel premiere hardcover editions with like the color bindings they release. You know what I'm talking about? They're usually like 1995 or something like that. I think it's in one of those. Really, I love the story. I can't recommend it enough. And back, you should find them should be cheap in a bargain bin. This is many people consider this one of the best Doctor Doom stories. Marvel graphic novel number 49. It's been re-released in trade paperback recently. Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, Triumph and Torment. One of the best Marvel writers of the 80s, Roger Stern. And art by young Mike Mignola. And Doctor Strange reluctantly aids Doom in his quest to free his mother's soul. And there's like a conclave of sorcerers, and for various circumstances, Strange is kind of pressed into service to help Doom, and Strange realizes that Doom does have significant mystical abilities, and he agrees to give Doom more knowledge, because he says, if we're going to go into the Netherworld, we're going to have to work together. And this is where they retcon that it was Mephisto who has possession of Cynthia Von Doom's soul. And they plunge in the Netherworld. Beautiful artwork by Mignola. Am I pronouncing his last name properly?
I think it's Mignola.
Okay, Mignola. My apologies. And ultimately, it's a tremendous story. It's currently in print in a trade paperback. And ultimately, they succeed, but at a price. And I won't tell you what the price is if you haven't read the story. But if you talk about great Doctor Doom stories, I would put this right in the top 5. It really captures the sort of the dark nobility of Doom and also the tragedy of the character. And if you love Doctor Strange, Roger Stern did a great run on Doctor Strange in the 1980s. And that really carries over into this story as well. Someday, can't promise it anytime soon because we've got a full duck. I'd love to do a Doctor Strange spotlight because he doesn't get, as much recognition as he always deserves. And he's had some great arcs in his life as a comic book character.
Mm-hmm. He's coming to the big screen before too much longer.
That's right.
So that might be the ideal
the impetus.
opportunity.
Yep. FF. I'm getting to the 90s now. Murdy, have anything else for the 80s you want to talk about?
Oh, well, let's see. Not a whole lot. Well, first, to jump back to the 70s for one quick thing. The Where's My Money, Honey incident. For those interested, it was in Heroes for Hire number 8 and 9 in 1973. Yes. Then, jumping back to the 80s, Dr. Doom had the honor of being the Marvel Universe representative villain in the second Superman and Spider-Man crossover.
I can see the cover. That's right.
And Parasite representing the DC Universe. And at the very end of the 80s, to segue into the 90s, Dr. Doom, or possibly a Doombot, was one of the prime movers of the Acts of Vengeance crossover.
Oh, right, which Matt has bound the whole thing up on the CGS library there.
Yep, right up there on the bookshelf, just a few volumes over from Secret Wars. So, yes, that was a bunch of major Marvel Universe villains and their lesser villain pawns switching opponents in hopes of achieving victory.
I never got into that story too much, but
and I think that is one of the stories in which Doom was involved that were later retconned as a Doombot.
Another good 80s story, I want to say, was Iron Man 200 or 250. Someone can correct me in the forums, where Doom and Iron Man go to Camelot again, and it's just another really I think it's Michelini against another really fun time travel story with those two characters that I recommend. As we get into the 90s and the 2000s, the 90s, I mean, we'll talk about this when we do our spotlight when we get to that eventually. The 90s wasn't the best era for the Fantastic Four, in my humble opinion, creatively. And the Doom appearances you have, nothing really jumps out for me. As we get into the 2000s, Murray, do you have anything for the 90s? I don't want to brush you off there.
Oh, well, a couple of things.
Go for it.
Let me be 90s apologist here. We'll just start with... talk about another possible Doombot appearance. In fact, I think someone explicitly said that this was a Doombot. But the first appearance of Squirrel Girl in Marvel Superheroes Winter Special number 8, 1991, Dr. Doom, as drawn by Steve Ditko, was involved there. Yes, and was defeated by Squirrel Girl in her first appearance.
Even Squirrel Girl had the Doom rite of passage.
Yes. Let's see. Another very minor appearance, but one that I personally liked was Silver Sable's solo series.
Oh, I never read that issue.
I've read relatively few issues of it myself, but after all, since as we've said, Silver Sable's homeland of Symkaria borders Latvaria.
Right.
The fourth issue of that series was entitled "My Dinner with Doom." And it was sort of as a diplomatic function. Silver Sable had a formal meal.
Oh, I have to hunt that issue out.
With Dr. Doom.
Absolutely.
This is written by one Gregory Wright, I think, who wrote pretty much all of that series.
I'll look for that. Maybe I have it in my bargain bins at the shop.
You probably do.
Yeah.
Okay, a biggie in the 90s was a story that happened in issue number 381. This is, of course, DeFalco's run.
Okay, I know where you're going here. Okay,
Yep,
go ahead.
it's called "And Then There Were Three."
Yes.
And on the cover, it was the Fantastic Four running towards the viewer in silhouette.
In silhouette, yep.
With a huge Fantastic Four logo with a bar sinister through it. "For No More."
That's
was
right.
The cover blurb, in which Doom, apparently, after being defeated by the Fantastic Four, reaches out his hand to Reed Richards to help him up, and then pulls what appears to be a murder-suicide gambit as both he and Richards disappear, leaving nothing but a pile of powder behind. And both Mr. Fantastic and Dr. Doom are completely absent from the Marvel Universe for over 2 years after that.
It was that long. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, they were committed to the bit. So I remember it said in the credit box, "Congratulations, reader, you've hit Comic Lotto." Trying to convince us that, we're really killing two major characters here. This is going to be a collector's item. And I was like...
That's in my 50-cent bins today.
I was 14 at the time, and I was only too willing to believe that I had hit Comic Lotto. So I treasured up that comic for a little
The
while.
90s, ladies and gentlemen.
It was indeed.
One
grand.
con after another, let me tell you.
But still, they kept those characters off the
They
table
did.
for a
Fair
lot
enough,
longer
yep.
than...
Now, were they back in time? Where did he take them? I forgot where he took them.
they certainly weren't dead. I think I'd kind of given up on reading the title by the time those
I
two
forgot where they
characters
went.
returned, but where or when they went.
I just remember Reed being in a beard, like
Yes.
he was somewhere where...
Yeah, they came back in FF number... number 406, Doom came back, and number 407, Doom with his beard was on the front cover.
Reed.
Reed with his beard. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So that's probably where you got the beard image from.
And the 90s, Doom was also involved, of course, in the Heroes Reborn, where he took control of the world Franklin Richards
fairly
created,
big
right?
way. Yeah. Actually, that's technically. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But let me also throw out a mention of Doom 2099.
I was hoping you'd get to that.
Love Doom 2099.
That was I forgot to put that in. That was an excellent series.
Yep, it was one of the first 2099 series, and certainly one of the longest lived. It and Spider-Man are the ones that lasted the longest, I believe. And Warren Ellis wrote it for a good chunk of itself.
Yes, he did.
And in issues number 41 through 43, Doom 2099 got to meet the 20th century original.
I don't think I was still reading the series up to that point. I'll have to hunt those out. Now, here's a question, because that was... Shane, what's your thoughts on that series?
Well,
I know you always liked it.
That was probably my favorite 2099 series that came out, and I stuck with that one the longest. I did fall off towards the end, but I thought I had picked up the issues and read them to finish it off at some point. I've long since gotten rid of those issues, and that's something I kind of regret. I kind of wouldn't mind getting those back at some point.
You mean you don't have the series at all?
Not anymore, no.
My friend will see if we can help you out with that.
But it was a lot of fun. It was a great series.
Now, here's a question I have, because they were teasing with this when I was reading it. Did they reveal was that actually Victor Von Doom? Or they never revealed, you're never sure?
It was a long-running mystery. They may have revealed the true identity of the 2099 Doom by the end of it, but like a lot of other people, I had kind of stopped paying attention.
Okay. That's what happened with me.
I don't quite remember that.
Okay. Because they always tease you that maybe it's Doom, maybe it isn't. Because in the first issue, he pops in his original armor.
Mm-hmm. And everybody, the usurper Tiger Wilde, who was in charge of Latvaria at that time, it just assumes it's another Doombot because they keep popping up even 100 years later. Yeah. But it turns out it's an actual living human being inside this armor, and his face is unmarred.
That's right.
So that's their first hint that this perhaps is not Doom, not the true Doom.
But it was definitely one of the strongest offerings of the 2099 series. What else, my friend?
I think that's about all I've got here for the 90s.
Okay. Now, as we get into the 2000s, one thing I want to know that's very important and has repercussions to this day, in Volume 3 of the Fantastic Four, right, because we had the Volume 2 Heroes crap, whatever that was.
I actually liked that for a time. Yeah,
okay. That was the Jim Lee one, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I couldn't get into it.
Towards the end, and especially when you got to that stupid issue 13, that was terrible. But at least the first half of it, I enjoyed more than most of the other ones.
All right.
God, I didn't read half of them, but
Well, just so people understand the numbering, then they restarted the book again.
Mm-hmm.
Volume 3, issue 54, Sue is pregnant. And just like the classic Byrne issue where they're worried about the cosmic rays and she loses the baby, well, that's a whole other story. But in the Byrne issue, she's going to give birth again, and Reed is off. He's somewhere he can't be there. He's involved in some mission with the Thing. And Johnny Storm is desperate because Sue might die and or lose the baby. Now, who else can help? Doom. So Johnny goes to Doom and basically begs him to come and save Sue. I love how Doom refers to him as Jonathan. And he goes to help Susan, as he calls her. And again, you kind of sense Doom seems to kind of respect Sue Storm, or at least has some begrudging respect for her. And he helps deliver the baby safely, but of course it's Doom, so there's a pact. There's a price. And the price was, I get to name your child. And he names her Valeria, after his long-lost love, who had renounced him because she was horrified by what he had become. And I just read the story recently. It was a Claremont story. It's a very solid issue, because Claremont wrote some of the Volume 3 of Fantastic Four. And when Reed finally gets there, he's so happy that Sue is okay, and Doom says something like, just remember, Richards, that I saved her. And he walks away. And, and we find out later that Doom, of course, being Doom, had used his sorcery to basically plant himself in Valeria, like he has a link to Valeria's mind, basically. And Merge, I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
I'm just thinking, but this is a Claremont story.
Yes.
Somewhere in Claremont's FF run, wasn't there some situation where Richards was forced into wearing a Doctor Doom armor?
That is right before these
his
stories.
identity?
Yes, that's also in this general era. I think it's before this that happens. Yeah, that's the same era, because I can picture the cover. Reed takes the mask off and it's him and so forth. That run isn't. I don't think it's anything spectacular, but that particular issue is very important in Doctor Doom's history, and it's a good Doom story. This leads to what I think is definitely one of the most important. Like I said, that top 5, this is on here. It's one of the most important Doctor Doom stories. It's Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo's, the late, great Mike Wieringo's classic run of Fantastic Four stories in that Volume 3. This story is called Unthinkable, issues 67 to 71. And that's when Shane, you'll love this. Yeah. This when they started the renumbering.
Yeah,
so it's also issues 496 to 500.
Yeah.
And I have an original page of art from this that I treasure because Mike Wieringo died tragically young. Mm-hmm. And the art page I have is just his pencils. It's beautiful. The opening story... I have to curse. This is fucked up, this story. Mark Waid, I remember reading an interview, and I'm paraphrasing. He said he wanted to remind people how evil Doctor Doom really is, or just how twisted he is probably a better word. And in the story, Doom is in normal street clothes in America. He just has like a kind of a nondescript mask to hide his features and like a fedora. And he's going through this gypsy town of it's kind of like a kitschy, touristy town for people to go see gypsies and like fortune tellers. And of course, he's revolted by it. And he goes to one fortune teller and curses her for being a phony. And then he's looking for Valeria, and he finds her because she's been hiding from him. She fled Latvaria years before. She's an older woman, but still beautiful. And he says, I want to renounce everything I've done. I just want to be with you. I want to give up. Because she says, all the terrible things you've done, I love you, but I want nothing to do with you. And he says, if you take my hand, I'm paraphrasing, but all I really need is to be with you now. And as you're reading this, it's Mark Waid, so it's so well done. For a moment, you think, is he really going to do this and turn over a new leaf? And she hesitates, and she's like, of course I will, and because she loves him. She takes his hand, and magic lights occur. She starts screaming, and she's like, "What's happening to me, Victor?" And he says, I had to make a pact with demons." And he said, in order to make the pact, I had to give up the most precious thing in the world to me. And her body is consumed. He kills her, and her flesh is ripped off her skeleton, and it forms around him, and he forms armor of his lover's flesh that he's wearing. And she's just a skeleton. He kills her, left on the floor. It's just the love of his life, right, since he was a child. And the demons have given him this power so he can finally best Richards. And in order to do this, he had to give up the most precious thing, which was Valeria. And he's wearing his lover's skin as his armor with the cape.
Wow.
This is creepy. I mean,
I was about to say that there are layers to this story,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of glad I didn't.
It's one of the most important and probably the most chilling story ever done about Doctor Doom. And he then, because he oversaw the birth of Valeria, he uses that mind power, and he goes into her mind. And she's a baby, right? We later learn, of course, that Valeria is a genius and all that when she starts to get older. And Franklin is abducted because Doom goes to the demons who he made the pact with, and they're devouring Valeria's bones to taunt him. And I have that page, actually. And he basically says, look, I'm not your pawns. Doom is no man's pawns. To him, this is like a bargain between equals, essentially. And they've given him this power, and he's tapped into awesome magics now. And he captures Franklin. Franklin is cast into this hell, basically. And Valeria has not said any words yet. And she's with Sue and Ben, and then she looks up at Sue, and her first word is Doom. And Reed comes in, he's panicked. They look in Valeria's eyes, and Reed goes, it's Doom's eyes in the baby's mind. It's creepy. And the FF go to Latvaria because Doom has taken Franklin. He's trapped in this demon realm. And he uses sorcery because he says to Richard, he says, look, you can't beat me because you refuse to acknowledge magic like I do, and now I'm going to prove I've always been your master, essentially. And not only does he beat the FF, but he concocts these tortures for each one of them, which are horrifying. Like he gives Sue like Johnny's flame power, but she can't put it out, so she's eternally burning. He has some of Dormammu's mindless ones just pummeling the thing 24 hours a day, like the rocks are coming off his body. And he takes Reed and he traps him in a library, and he says, you can get out of here, but all these books are about sorcery. And I'm going to trap you. While I'm torturing your family, you have to get out. But you can't get out, Richards, because you don't believe in magic. And to you, and he said, your ego is so great. He's taunting Reed. He says that you can't admit that you don't know anything about this. Have fun. And he leaves him in this room, locked in it, with a vast library of magical tomes. And long story short, Reed, with the help of Doctor Strange, whose mystic form is free, astral form, because Doom had also defeated Strange, so he couldn't help them. He eventually, I won't spoil it, but if you're into Doctor Doom, you have to read the story. There was a trade that's out of print, but the Mike Wieringo, Mark Waid, FF trades they have, they're more expensive. They're thicker trades. It's in there. Wow. Mark Waid wanted people to remind people of why Doctor Doom is such a terrifying villain. In this story, he is. Wow. And, I mean, he's wearing his dead lover's skin as armor.
That's creepy enough.
Yeah, it's a classic. One other book I want to mention, Marvel Double Shot #2. Murder, this is probably in your time bubble pile somewhere, I bet.
I'm quite sure it is, actually. I remember this story. Yeah. It's written by Priest.
And Paolo Rivera does the art, so it's beautiful. I have a Paolo Rivera Dr. Doom sketch in my store, a color sketch. It's a short story. It's Marvel Double Shot. It's just about, it opens with Doom in the Great Hall of his castle, and what's classic is there's an orchestra waiting to play, because he wants his people to be cultured, so they all have to assemble to hear music. And he said, I want an orchestra tonight to play Russian music. So the conductor is waiting with his arms raised, and you don't know for how long, until Doom actually appears and sits in his throne. And he's wearing like medals and like a tunic, like it's the king. And he finds that there's a violinist who he reveals is actually a NATO intelligence agent her face has been transformed by plastic surgery to look like Valeria to kind of torment him. And of course he sees through everything. And the story is just about how he deals with this spy. It's like, I don't know, 10 pages. It's one of the best Dr. Doom stories I've ever read, period. It so perfectly captures what Doom is all about, basically. It's great.
One line of dialogue I remember from having skimmed that story ages ago. Doom is talking to someone about artwork he has in his palace. I forget which artist he said it was, Renoir possibly. He said, I used to have 2 by this artist. I had one destroyed. It displeased me.
What else you got, Murd, from the modern era?
Very little, really.
Yeah.
We've been pretty more thorough than we thought we were going to be.
I can't help myself. It's Doom. Sorry.
All right. Now, remember I said a while ago there was one particular early 2000s Doom story that I think really bore out what you'd said earlier about how Dr. Doom is so resourceful, he's a threat even if he's completely naked and confined to a locked room. It played out of Doom's involvement in the Heroes Reborn universe. As most of the heroes who had been shunted off to the Heroes Reborn universe after the Onslaught event by Franklin Richards made their way back to the Marvel Universe proper, Thor and Dr. Doom got lost along the way. Thor had adventures elsewhere in beyond realms, but Doom just crashed back down to the Heroes Reborn Earth.
The Counter-Earth, yeah.
Yes, and he had, or Planet Doom, as Doom would come to insist on calling it. His armor was destroyed, so he was literally left naked in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Not even in one of the civilized parts of Counter-Earth. Which wasn't that civilized because it was undergoing cataclysmic upheavals. Yeah. It was kind of falling apart at the seams, coming apart at the tectonic plates. It had served its purpose, and now it was falling into ruin, and so it was kind of an apocalyptic bedlam going on Earth, and various sort of warlord-dominated city-states were arising. Doom had to find his way back to civilization. First, he had to survive the wilderness. Yeah. Then he was taken in by some bandit chieftain someplace, and he had to conquer him. And so this is all happening, incidentally. I think I forgot to mention this at the outset, in a mini-series called simply Doom.
That's right. I remember that series. Yep.
It was 3 issues by Chuck Dixon.
Yes.
Art by Leonardo Manco.
That's right. Yep.
And it's just showing how terrifyingly... I have to use the word again, resourceful. Yeah. Doom can be. Even he can build himself back up from nothing. You might say it's easy for someone to be imposing if he's the sovereign of his own country. He's got almost limitless technological resources at his command. Here, Doom has nothing. And he ends up as
the planet.
Yes, exactly. The ruler of this parallel Earth, which he renames, of course, after himself, Planet Doom.
And we should mention that, as we kind of wind up here, that on more than one occasion, Doom has lost power in Latvaria. He's not always consistently ruled Latvaria. There's been other people who have been in charge. Christoph, at one point, I think, has kind of been a regent for him. But I think in recent history, Doom suffered an attack, was it by the leader? Where he lost some of his intellect. His intellect was damaged. This is very much in the modern era. And he was also involved in the Future Foundation. And right now, Doom is back in charge of Latvaria, just to bring it up to the present day, and in Latvaria, and Valeria is with him. Now, Valeria now is growing up, and she's...
This is Valeria Richards.
Yes, and they've established that Valeria Richards is probably going to be even smarter than Reed Richards. And she refers to Doom as like her uncle or her godfather, essentially. And she actually has gone to Latvaria to sort of help Doom regain some of the intellect that was lost. And they have like a almost like a family relationship, essentially, and so they're exploring that as well. As always, Dr. Doom, whatever he's involved in, it's usually very interesting. And like I've always said, I just feel the Marvel Universe wouldn't be the same if his presence wasn't there. But I could go on and on for hours, but we've already gone on for quite some time, I'm sure, my friend. But I hope people are this has whet people's appetite for really getting into the Doom character, because what we just mentioned is just some of the best stuff out there. And again, I mentioned Books of Doom. I'll just quickly mention that again. That came out in 2006 by Ed Brubaker. It is the definitive version of Doom's origin. He expands dramatically on the classic Lee Kirby origin without disrespecting it. It really goes into what happened with Valeria, what happened in college with Reed. And it's narrated by Doom himself, essentially, and it really goes into just the price Doom pays for sort of his dark greatness, essentially. criminally, that book is not in print right now. I don't know why that trade is not in print. The back issues can be found. They should even be in bargain bins. The Books of Doom is 6 issues, miniseries, easily one of the most important of all the Dr. Doom stories. And I highly recommend you seek that book out, either in backstock or in the individual issues, because it's the definitive, respectful sort of elaboration on Doom's origin, including revealing why he calls himself Dr. Doom.
Wow.
I've shot my bolt, sir.
Well done. As always.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, I think we may all be proud.
Oh.
But not as proud as Doom himself.
Well, and this is one of those...
We don't have enough arrogance between the three of us to equal the merest fraction.
Not even iota, no.
This is one of those episodes where I may not have as much to say because I haven't read most of those stories, but it sure was educational and fun to just sit back and listen to.
Honored, brother.
And get a few pointers of things to read up on for Doom. Interestingly enough, with Ben, we were watching the second Fantastic Four movie on cable. It's running on TNT or something, whatever. And he said, "Do you have anything about Doom?" I'm like, "Well, not really. I don't have a whole lot of Marvel stuff, and I don't know that there's anything just dedicated to Doom." And I ended up finding something and gave it to him, and I don't think he's read it yet with school starting and everything. But just from that little tiny tidbit, he really got interested in Doom.
Yeah,
and he hasn't read him anywhere else or anything like that. But when we go to the bookstore or the library or wherever, he's looking for.
Next time I see you, I'll
Doom.
bring you my copy of Books of Doom. Your son can read it.
Okay.
Because the trade isn't in print anymore. Another great little short story, I just thought of it, is when they did the Cabal when Norman Osborn and all that, the Secret Invasion era.
Yeah.
And
Dark
there was a story where the Cabal met was Doom, Emma Frost, Submariner, Norman, and the Hood. And there's one scene where it's just Namor and Doom. And as Merge established, they have a long, complicated history.
Mm-hmm.
And Doom basically says, Osborn will go mad again. He says, when that happens, you'll have the sea, I'll have the land. And they have Doom kind of imagining how he would basically murder all these different people on the Cabal. And that's it's just a short story, but again, it's one of those great little snapshots of how Doom ticks.
Yeah,
basically.
How he thinks what he's going to do.
So well done.
Huh.
All right, let me introduce one more little controversy here. Talking of how Doom ticks and his unslakable ambition and ruthlessness. One controversial Doom moment, and it is just like a one-panel thing. Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 3, I guess it would be, possibly. It's the Straczynski run.
I mentioned earlier, number 50, I think.
No,
right?
this is earlier than that.
Oh, earlier, okay.
Yep, number 36. This
Okay.
is the black-covered post-9/11 issue.
Oh, where Doom weeps.
Yes, the scene
Okay.
of all those supervillains standing
Yes.
around in the ashes of Ground Zero and
Yeah.
Doom shedding tears for the fallen. Given what we've already established about Doom, is that really in character for him?
If I remember correctly, I haven't read that in a long time. I think Straczynski, as the narrator, said that basically Doom's weeping was over the waste. I don't have it in front. I mean, I can't remember specifically, but something like the way he explained it was Doom just found the whole thing so wasteful, and that's why he was weeping over it. And not to disrespect, the intentions of that story, but do I think it fits into Dr. Doom's characters that's been established? No. Not at all.
I'm
But
inclined to agree.
But
On both counts. I mean, I understand why it was done.
But I understand
It was
why they did it because
to salve the readership's still very badly wounded feelings,
and to show that an event of that enormity that he would even have an impact on those characters. But in the reality of the Marvel universe, because that story, it's kind of in its own thing because of what the topic that it's addressing. And I think it's a great issue, but Dr. Doom has killed God knows how many people. I mean, often sometimes, there's issues where some servant insults him and he just breaks the guy's neck. I mean, it's not, I would say this, though, for someone like Doom, there's a purpose in when he does acts like that. So he may have also seen this as just such as pointless, wanton destruction that doesn't serve any real purpose.
Yes.
So
all these potential slaves of Doom.
Yeah, one could
senselessly
explain
slaughtered.
it away like that. But again, I understand why they did the way they did. Because if they're going to have any villain acknowledge the grief of that, it would be Dr. Doom, because he is the preeminent villain in the Marvel Universe, basically. So, in that context, that still worked for me the way they did it. So, I'd forgotten about that. Thank you, Merton.
Had you read that story, Shane?
Yes. Yeah. It's one of the few Spider-Man issues from that era that I have yet.
Oh, it's great, and I think John Romita Jr. drew that in like record time, if I remember correctly. I mean, it's quite an achievement.
Yeah,
I think it's out of all the 9/11 tribute comics, I think that's my one. I think is the best of the various ones that came out of that era. I think we've shot our bolt.
Yeah,
brethren.
All right, this episode of Comic Geek Speaks was brought to you by superherostuff.com, where you go to for all of your
superhero stuff.
Wow, even with a superhero pose. Go there, check out.
I'm a tool. I can't help it.
For all your gift-giving needs for any geek in your friendship, family, or otherwise, just somebody you know. Check out that Doom hoodie that zips all the way up to make the Doom cape and mask. It's pretty cool.
The master.
All right. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To send an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by the Comic Forums and comment on this episode. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We would like to thank everyone who contributes to the show. Please continue to do so. It means a lot. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is